Okay, so Margin Carja, and welcome to the 77th meeting of the Economy Committee. Some members will be attending this morning's meeting via Starleaf, and our witnesses will be briefing us this morning via Starleaf. The meeting will be broadcast live when open to the public, and a recording will be made available on the committee's webpage on the Assembly website. Just to remind members that the bill briefing will be hand-sorted as per protocol, and also just to remind members to mute their tablet devices when they're not speaking. So moving on, we have apologies this morning from Claire, and I'm sure committee members would want to extend their condolences to Claire on the loss of her father as well. So moving on then to item number 2, which is our draft minutes. There is a copy of the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of October at page 5 of our packs. Are members content that those are an accurate reflection of the meeting?
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on then, item number 3 is Chair's business, and at page 12 in your pack there's an invitation from Queen's to an online event on Thursday the 11th of November at 5 p.m. entitled In Conversation with Professor Andrew Hayne, hosted by the Senator George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace, Security and Justice and Public Engagement, and members can access the link in the invitation in their pack if they want to register to attend. So then our second item of Chair's business is at page 13 of your packs, and members will recall there is we did an informal meeting with the Children's Law Centre on the 21st of October, and they have shared the note from that meeting regarding the High Street voucher and the extension to under 18s. The Children's Law Centre has cited reasons why they believe the card should have gone to the entire local population, and the Children's Law Centre also acknowledges that it's probably too late for any amendment to the High Street voucher scheme at this point, but they believe that a whole population rollout should be planned for any similar scheme. And obviously we advocated very strongly that the scheme be extended to 16 to 17-year-olds. So obviously that's to note at this point, unless members have any additional points they want to make in respect of it. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. I know the Minister said yesterday of the £21 million that was held in reserve. I think he said he spent, the plan to spend around 8 million, which leaves 13 million, which could be considered, I'm sure, for a 16 to 18-year-old. What do we estimate the cost of that to be?
4.5 million.
4.5 million. So it's well within the envelope. So hopefully that's something the Minister will consider.
Go ahead, Mike.
Chair, could we ask the department how come it's now 8 million? Because when Tommy O'Reilly briefed us, it was 2 to 3.
Yep, we can do that, Peter.
Yep, we'll go ahead and do that, Chair.
Apologies, Chair, if I may, now as in my first comment as a member of the Economy Committee, so I'm straying into this late, obviously, but I understand that in your previous evidence sessions, and it was Mr. O'Reilly had said that the department would have a dashboard where it would be able to ascertain location and composition of spend. I don't know if we are planning to ask them for an update on that. Would it be useful?
We get a weekly update just before that information is tweeted out. So they have it on the basis of location via council, gender, disability, the number of cards that have been applied for and verified, and the number that have been activated and are in use. So we'll continue to bring that through. The committee had asked on a number of occasions for a live dashboard.
Yeah.
And that hasn't happened. So we are still getting weekly updates just before they're put out to the public.
I presume they would have, I mean, they might, I don't know, I'm asking the question to be able to say, we know that, that X amount of this was spent at Tesco in Craigavon or wherever.
Sure, yet each spend can be pinned down through the 300 merchant codes that they're using, and also by location. So that data will be available. Whether it's currently being processed in a usable way, I'm not sure, but we can certainly ask for that.
Okay, thank you. So moving on then to our first briefing this morning, item number 4 on the agenda is from the Utility Regulator and the Consumers Council. There's a clerk's memo at page 20 of our packs. There's a presentation from the Consumer Council at page 22. Annex A of the Consumer Council presentation in relation to energy prices at page 30. the Consumer Council's response to the energy strategy policy options at page 62, and then a presentation from the utility regulator at page 136. So the committee has previously met informally with the utility regulator to discuss the rise in energy prices, and the purpose of today's briefing is to consider the price rise issue and to discuss how this issue can be ameliorated going forward through the energy strategy and the potential changes to roles and remit of the regulator and the Consumer Council. So we have our witnesses in the spotlight. So welcome to the meeting, John French and Kevin Shields from the utility regulator.
Yes, good morning, Chair.
A wee bit of feedback we're just getting there, sorry. And also welcome to the meeting, Noyona who is Chief Executive of the Consumer Council, and Peter McLennan, who is Director of the Consumer Council. So I'm going to hand over to yourselves. I think Noyana is going to present first, and then John. And just to remind members that this briefing needs to finish by about 11, so we can do our deliberations around the parental bereavement leave bill. So if I hand over to yourselves, and then we can bring members in for some discussion and questions.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Can I just check?
No.
Chair, can we just ask that John and Kevin go on mute for now? Thank you.
Okay, good to go. Great, thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to brief you on the consumer impact of rising energy prices. As requested by the committee, I will focus on home heating oil, petrol and diesel, and John and Kevin will cover off electricity and gas in a bit. I'll also give an outline of key considerations when it comes to the
Chair,
energy
if
consumer.
if I can just stop you, we're getting really bad sound. Can I ask, I appreciate both you and Peter are in picture. Would it be possible if you could move closer to whatever microphone? We may just have to use this in some kind of relay, but you're too far away from the sound, the microphone to come through clearly. If you can go a bit closer, it may mean having
Is this
to
any better, Peter?
have a go. Speak for a while. We'll let you know.
Okay, so I will give an outline of the key considerations when it comes to the energy consumer in Northern Ireland, but I'll also give you a wide...
Noyona, it's very echoey. Is there any way for you to get closer? I appreciate that might not keep both of you in picture.
No, that's absolutely fine. I have the microphone right next to me, Peter, so I'm not sure how much closer I can...
I think it might just be the acoustics in the room. If you're as close to the microphone as possible.
Yes, okay. So nobody, I will lower my head. Is this any better?
That's a bit better. We'll persevere for now.
Okay, no problem. Well, if the committee will forgive me, I'll focus looking on the microphone and not necessarily the camera as a result. So apologies for that sort of slight delay. I'll start by telling you a little bit about the Consumer Council. I know community members will know about our work, but as Northern Ireland statutory consumer body, we represent all our citizens, but we prioritise those who are disabled or have long-term health conditions, are of pensionable age, are on low incomes, as well as anyone living in rural areas. And we are also a designated super complaints body. So if features of a market appears to be significantly harming the interests of consumers, we can raise a super complaint with the relevant regulator here in Northern Ireland or in the UK. And all our work is delivered through the prism of 8 consumer protection principles developed by the United Nations. And that makes us citizen-centric, and we support inclusive economic recovery. And finally, in energy, our cover disputes, complaints handling, as well as performance standards of regulated suppliers. So moving on, our dependency on imported energy fossil fuels only amplifies the need to decarbonise our economy and reduce carbon emissions. And decarbonisation is important. That is why it's one of 4 priorities in our corporate plan. We think it should be delivered at least cost to consumers. It should promote switching to clean energy, support energy efficiency, encourage green innovation, and progress decarbonising transport. And we believe
Iona, can we just pause it again for a second? We're losing your sound every so often. I don't know whether it's the microphone is being knocked or masked when you're dealing with pages or whatever. But if you can keep us close, apologies, but if you can keep us close to the microphone and nothing else near it as possible. If you want to start or keep going, but just be very, very acutely aware of not having anything knock the microphone and stay close to it.
No problem, I'll do my best. So when it comes to consumer protections, our view is that robust protections are therefore critical across all energy markets. So consumers feel supported, they can trust it, they can access trusted independent advice, and they are empowered to make informed decisions. And I'm now going to move on to talk about some specific considerations for the Northern Ireland energy consumer. Starting with our spending power. We have less spending power. Our discretionary income is lower than the UK average. Our lowest earners, approximately 190,000 households, are more reliant on social securities, and a greater proportion of our jobs are low paid. And our fuel mix is also as you can see from the slide, around 37% of households in Northern Ireland are connected to the gas grid, compared to 85% in England. And we have higher rates of fuel poverty. And there's a clear correlation between fuel poverty and energy prices. So in 2011, when heating bills were high, fuel poverty was over 44%. By 2018, incomes had risen, but heating costs were at similar levels to 2011, meaning households could better afford their energy costs. Today, prices are on the rise again, and households are starting to experience the pressure of fuel affordability. So when it comes to home heating oil, petrol and diesel, the graph on the right demonstrates this rise in fuel costs I've just mentioned. The black line is for home heating oil, the red line is petrol, and the blue line is diesel. Our ongoing research shows the average cost of home heating oil to the Northern Ireland consumer expensive as has been in the last 7 years. Data from the AA provides a similar picture for petrol and diesel, and this is reinforced by tracking research we undertake into forecourt prices, and we've done that since 2020. There is healthy competition in the home heating oil market, but only self-regulation in the form of a domestic customer charter introduced by the Northern Ireland Oil Federation in 2013. The Consumer Council has no statutory powers in this market, unlike in electricity and gas, beyond the powers of our General Consumer Council order. And it's worth noting that in 2011, the Office of Fair Trading described the lack of regulation as an oddity of the Northern Ireland market, and recently, the Competition and Markets Authority stated in their Energy Strategy Consultation response that off-gas grid consumers would benefit from similar regulatory protections to on-grid households. So when you then move on to look at the wider picture, it's really hard to imagine a more challenging backdrop for consumers in relation to tax and benefits, household bills, and the wider economy. For example, in March 2021, the average 4-week shopping basket was £44 more in Northern Ireland than the rest of the UK, and this was 15% more than in 2019. And if you travel the Northern Ireland average of just over 5,000 miles every year by car, your annual petrol bill is £140 more in October 2021 prices than in October 2020 prices. And it is also worth noting that this is not just a domestic consumer problem. Small businesses are equally impacted by rising commodity costs, and these will impact their profitability or be passed on to consumers. And unfortunately, we see no evidence that the current crisis could not happen. It is incumbent upon us all to take proactive action. The Northern Ireland Energy Strategy, which aims to achieve net zero by 2050, can be a big part of the solution. It is the result of extensive collaboration led by the Department for the Economy across government, academia, consumer bodies like ourselves, the third sector and industry, underpinned by research which we have contributed to quite significantly. It is not the only lever available to the Northern Ireland Executive, but it is a critical one. And from the Consumer Council's perspective, we want a sustainable energy future that works for us all and delivers 4 consumer outcomes. 1, a just and fair transition, ensuring affordability, security of supply and consumer protection. 2, behavioural change so consumers are empowered to engage in decisions affecting them. They can manage their energy demand and they can avail of new opportunities. Protection combines the participation of all consumers, particularly those in vulnerable circumstances, with effective modern regulation. And 4, planning, prioritisation and delivery is based on trust, fairness and a collective openness for innovation while reducing fuel poverty and balancing societal and economic prosperity. So the Consumer Council would welcome a scenario where consumers are enabled to strive to achieve net sustainability rather than it becoming another burden upon them. So apologies again for the sound issues. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening, and Peter and I are happy to take any questions on any of the points that I've raised after the Utility Regulator does their presentation.
Thank you. I'll hand over to yourself, John. Oh, we can't hear you. John on mute?
No, he's not.
Sorry, thanks, Chair.
There we go.
I don't think he hit start.
Apologies. Thanks for the opportunity again to update the committee. Peter, are you driving through the slides? Is that how it works?
No, we expect you to do that, John, if you want to have the slides. But the members all have them in their packs.
All right, sorry. Just give me 2 seconds. Well, if the members have them in the pack, I'll just run through the slides then, if that's okay. Yep. So the Utility Regulator, as the Consumer Council is as well, is a statutory body. We're an independent, non-ministerial government department whose chair and board are appointed by the Department for Finance, and we're directly accountable to yourself in the Northern Ireland Assembly. In terms of our duties in energy, we have a statutory duty to protect the interests of both electricity and gas consumers, and similarly in water consumers. But in gas, there is another duty in terms of ensuring the development of an efficient, economic and coordinated gas industry here in Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, as you can see on the next page of your presentation, there is 3 gas distribution areas across Northern Ireland. So the original Phoenix area that came when gas came to Northern Ireland initially in '96, the Firmus area in 2006, and the recent gas to the west. Now, we regulate, it's European policy not to regulate prices. You know, it's down for the market to set the best price. So like Asda competes against Tesco and the likes of Sainsbury's. But we felt when that legislation came forward at the start of the last decade, 2010, that Northern Ireland wasn't the size and scale really to enable competition to occur as the main driver, and they needed to be the fallback of regulation, especially for the largest incumbent suppliers, the largest suppliers in the domestic market. So we therefore regulate Power and I as the old electricity board across Northern Ireland, and in the Phoenix and the SGN areas, we regulate SSE Electricity, which was the old Phoenix Supply Company, and in the Firmus area that runs from Derry, Londonderry across down around Loughney down to Newry, we regulate Firmus in what is known as the 10 towns. Now, the price of natural gas, as you can see on the next slide, and this is a graph that's taken from Bloomberg, the price of natural gas historically ranges around the 40 to 60 pence per therm range. And, you know, in a winter period, you'd expect it to go up to the higher levels of that. You know, if it's a bad winter, you'd expect it to go that 60 pence range. But unfortunately, what we've seen on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic is that gas prices have just shot up to levels never experienced before. So as you can see on this graph, which was taken from Bloomberg on the 5th of October, gas prices went over the £3 per therm mark. And on the following day, it went up on the day-ahead market to £4.07. Now it has dropped down, and just looking at the market this morning, it's around the £1.90 mark. But that's still, you know, a good £1.30 more expensive than it would be in a normal time at this point in year. The next table on the next slide just shows how gas prices have moved over this period. So you can see on the day-ahead market for buying today, for delivery tomorrow, it's around, we were seeing prices in March of around 45 pence a therm, which would be a normal price, maybe slightly high for coming out of winter, but around a normal price. But as you've seen, coming into October, the average price for the month was just over £2.20. And it's even stronger as you look into the winter period. So this is the next table below, shows buying today for delivery in January to March in terms of the next gas quarter. So, you know, 43 pence back in March to over £2.50, the average for October. The next table just shows where gas prices have moved, and this was close of play on Friday. As I say, it's gone up this morning to about the £1.90 mark, but the market also within all this remains really volatile. So you can see quite often movements of 30 to 50p a day on those movements on the gas. Now, analysts are saying there is some hope in the next couple of weeks that we're starting to see more LNG cargoes, that's liquefied natural gas that comes on the back of ships, coming into the UK over the next fortnight, and President Putin, through Gazprom, has promised that there will be more gas flowing into Europe on the 8th of November. But this changes on a daily basis, and you know, there's also behind this a forecast of a very cold winter, a cold November in Europe, so that's pushing prices up. But you can see in that graph the ups and the downs, and the downs are generally when Russia has made an announcement that it's going to increase flows, but sometimes that's found to be not the case, so you've seen the prices spike back up over that period in time. Just turning on to the next graph, I think this wasn't a graph we showed you in the last presentation, and it's probably a really important graph in terms of where things are going for the future. So this is taken looking at the forward curve. So the forward what analysts are projecting is the forward price for gas for the next 18 months. And it's taking it from each November. So the top line, as you can see, the darker green, is taking it from October 2021 and standing back what the price looked back in October 2020 and October 19. And you can see the October 21 graph line doesn't register with historic norms. So we're looking this once in a lifetime, once in a generation movement in prices that we're seeing at the moment globally is likely to last for at least 18 months. And unfortunately, I was looking at other reports this morning, and the projection is that it will remain at the £1 mark for the next 36 months. So the next 3 years, we're looking at potentially high gas prices, well above the normal 40 to 60 pence. Now, turning on to the next slide, and I think this is an update of the slide we gave you before. The reason really behind these high prices on a global level is supply and demand. So Russia has reduced the amount of supply into Russia. There's been less LNG cargoes on the back of ships from the likes of Qatar and the USA as they have been bought up by Asia and South America. And initially in the start of March, April, June, July time, there was less gas storage in Europe. And also because of the low wind weather patterns that we've seen across Europe, there's been a drive to use gas-fired power stations rather than renewables. The table there that you see is flows of natural gas from from Russia into Europe. And you can see, we've come out of the COVID-19 pandemic, that Russia has significantly reduced the flows of gas, especially through the Ukraine pipelines into Russia. And things change on the day. So this weekend, you can see the red on that graph is the pipeline that flows through Poland. The Russians closed that off over this weekend, and Germany had to flow gas back into Poland from supplies in Germany. So it does change on a frequent basis, but that's just kind of to graphically show that Russia actually has reduced supply into Europe over this period. Now that's the geopolitical, how it plays out in Northern Ireland itself. The next couple of graphs just show in terms of the largest suppliers in those regulated areas. So the Greater Belfast and the Western is the SSE tariff. And as you know, that went up by just under 22% on the 1st of October this year. And you can see the price movements that have occurred over the last 10 years. That doesn't take account of inflation. That's just the real actual price, the nominal actual price that gas charge. So that goes back to what Noyona was saying about high fuel poverty levels back in 2011, when gas prices, probably if you take into account of inflation, were even higher. In terms of the pie chart there, it just shows you that in terms of natural gas, 50% of the final bill is made up of wholesale costs. So that does show you the impact of when we're seeing these high gas prices, that they do impact on consumers' bills. Some people talk about profitability. In terms of these regulated tariffs, we only allow the companies a margin of 2%. The Competition and Market Authority say the lowest regulated margin a regulator can charge is 1.9%. So we think probably 2% is the lowest we can get away with in terms of the size and scale of Northern Ireland. But just for comparison with our two nearest neighbours, the GB price cap allows a margin of 3% profit margin, and the unregulated market in Ireland, the average profit margin for companies there is 3.5%. The next table shows you similar graphs for Firmus in terms of their makeup, and we are in conversations with them at the moment to look for a price increase on the 1st of December, and that announcement, we're just doing the final sums with them at the moment, and that price increase will need to be announced next week, because it has to be announced 21 days before it goes live. The next table just shows a comparison of how we compare to our two nearest neighbours. So the Firmus announcement brought the gas in October, brought gas prices in. I would say before this, prices in Northern Ireland were gas prices were the cheapest in Europe, far from Luxembourg. But this has moved ourselves quite up the scale in terms of European prices. But we still compare favourably with our two nearest neighbours. So Firmus went up to £700, so just over £700 a year. The Greater Belfast and the West area is in and around the GB price cap, and the unregulated market in Ireland, the biggest supplier there, Bord Gosh, is currently charging an average household £908. The GB price cap, you'll probably have seen the press around that in GB. They set their price cap at the start of August, where gas prices were about £1. And that's why you've seen about 20 companies to date in GB going bust, because they cannot buy gas. If they didn't buy gas at the start of August, they cannot buy gas at the price Ofgem is saying. So that's why Ofgem made an announcement to the stock market last week, saying that they would have to review the price cap mechanism, because it wasn't working for the market. And they're proposing to come out with amendments in that in February. But just to say, that price cap will have to change on the 1st of April, and already they're talking about the speculation that will need to increase by between £800 and £1,000 in GB to take account of increasing gas prices. That's where we are in gas. In terms of the next couple of slides, on electricity, Power and I are the only price-regulated domestic supplier in Northern Ireland. They increased their prices by just under 7% on the 1st of July. And that shows you how the table below shows you how they compete with our two nearest neighbours. So in terms of electricity for a domestic supplier, on average household, we're about £200 cheaper than the GB price cap and just under £300 cheaper than Ireland. That also needs to change, and Power and I are in discussions with us about moving the prices towards the end of this year, early next year. The non-regulated tariffs, non-regulated price tariffs are there below in that table, just showing you how they have moved. We don't regulate them. They compete against the regulated tariff, which is seen as a price to beat tariff. And you can see the price movements they've made during this year. The next table just shows you where Power and I is in terms of their movements over back to 2006. And again, that 50% of their final tariff is made up of around wholesale costs. The supply margin in the profit margin for Power and I is 2.2%, and that just reflects what we see as a slightly more competitive market in electricity. Next table is just a domestic charge, just showing you that prices in Northern Ireland actually have been cheaper than our two nearest neighbours for the regulated tariff back to 2014. And the next table is the dashboard we get from the single electricity market. And I think this, as I've mentioned before, this does play into the energy policy here in Northern Ireland. So you can see the day-ahead market on the top figures. Last year in September, the day-ahead market for electricity was €44 a megawatt hour. The all-island market is in euros. Gas is traded in sterling, so there is some currency fluctuations in this. But €44 back in September 2020, and as you can see, it's just around the €200 mark currently around September, October time. The reasons behind that increase is that we've seen demand increase at following the COVID-19 pandemic, especially manufacturing in Ireland. But the big impact this year has been the lack of wind. And you can see that, suppose take July, for example, there was 62% less wind than last year. And why that makes a difference is renewable generation, onshore generation. Any renewable generation is cheap energy, but when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, we have to fall back to conventional power stations. So that 62% is equivalent to 2 power stations being offline. And what also we've had this year is 2 actual power stations being offline. So Whitegate outside of Cork and Huntstown 2 just outside of Dublin have been out. They've just come back these next couple of weeks, but they've been out since February, which meant that we've had to fall back on windless days. The gas-fired generation, which, as we've said, the price of gas has shot up. The price of coal also has shot up. So the likes of Kilroot and Moneypoint and Tarbert power stations are coal-fired generation, and China's has sent out the edict to its companies to buy coal at any cost, any price. And the other thing below that is the price of carbon. As you can see, large emitters have to buy a carbon permit for each tonne of carbon they emit. The next couple of graphs, so I'm just going through that, it just shows you how unprecedented that is. So that's looking at coal prices back to 2008, showing that this is an all-time high. And as Noyona and Peter have shown on the oil prices, it's nearly at a 6-year high. It is at a 6-year high in terms of Brent crude. The following graph just shows you how unprecedented it is with carbon prices, and how the carbon prices increased significantly this year because of that lack of wind and people having to buy permits for conventional generation. As part of the Northern Ireland Protocol, we are part of the EU emissions trading scheme. What Europe has said is that the additional revenues that have been received this year can be used for fuel poverty measures for European countries. So we're just trying to see through the Department for the Economy where our revenues have gone, and could these funds also be used for fuel poverty here in Northern Ireland. Next slide just looks at the economic context. As we know, we've seen the end of furlough, and Noyon and Peter have raised the issue that we have lower average wages and household incomes than our equivalents in GB. Next slide just shows what we've been trying to do to help in this period. So we've been briefing people to explain how unprecedented this is. We've been working with the Department for Communities and Department for the Economy and the Consumer Council behind the scenes to identify practical measures that hopefully can be used to alleviate the burden of these price increases this winter. We're looking to see what we can do with regulation, to see what we can squeeze out of the system. So we've brought forward gas network reduction costs that have reduced the impact of the wholesale prices by about £20 a year, but they've just been dwarfed by the increases we've seen on the international market. We've made sure the energy suppliers are all reminded of their responsibilities to consumers, and we encourage consumers who are struggling to contact their suppliers to make sure they're on the best deal and they're getting the support that they should be getting through a regulated system. Final slide, is just talking about the Northern Ireland Energy Strategy. We believe it still needs to have a focus on affordability and cost to make sure people can afford, and it's a fair transition moving forward. We need to make sure that as we develop a renewables-based generation system, that we manage to keep the lights on when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, as has occurred this year. And apparently this weather pattern occurs every 5 to 6 years across Europe. We believe our statutory duties need to change. You know, our statutory duties were set out back in 2003. They reflect the market as it was then. We need to be able to support the government and achieve its net zero target. We believe we need more powers around protecting consumers, looking at affordability and vulnerability, and supporting the economic development of Northern Ireland, and also looking more at security of supply. So sorry that we couldn't get that on the screen, but that's just a quick rattle through the presentation we have there, Chair.
Thank you both for those presentations, and I know I've said this to you both privately in meetings as well, but it's a really bleak picture over the next number of months for consumers, and in particular here in the north, where we do have higher levels of fuel poverty. And I guess if we look at the interventions that have been brought forward so far, the British government announced the Household Support Fund, and I think we're only getting 13.7 million in respect of that. And I know last year the Communities Minister had put in place the COVID one-off fuel payment, and that gave I think £200 to households on certain benefits, and that totalled I think something in the region of 45 million. So gas prices currently are about 5 times higher than they were at this point last year. So comparatively speaking, the funding that we have to work with is very limited. And just in relation to the interventions that have been made at a British government level, is there anything that you can speak to in respect of that? In some other European states, for example, I think in Portugal, they have put in place a windfall tax on some of the big generators, so that that can be redirected towards supports for consumers. And I guess just in relation to the potential tax interventions, VAT on energy bills, I think, is one that has been looked at in some other European states. Are there any kind of measures that could be done at that sort of level that is going to alleviate some of the pain for consumers?
Yes, I think you're right. You know, the Spanish government, the German government, and the Portuguese government has looked at the profit margins that. Going back to what I was saying earlier, the European policy is that all energy is competitive. So, you know, generators compete in the same way as Asda and Tesco do. But recognising the low levels of wind that's been seen this year, that conventional generators have been making higher profits. So the Spanish government and the Portuguese and German government has looked to bring another tax on those companies to see if that support can be given to fuel poverty. The other countries have also, as I said, looked at that emissions trading scheme to see if support can be given. And also, as you say, VAT is at 5% for domestic consumers and 20% for business consumers on energy. So that will increase as the Treasury's take will increase as prices rise.
Okay, that's useful for us to put forward some potential ideas in respect of that. In respect of, I guess, your own powers and the statutory duties that both of you have in respect of consumers, can you maybe just talk us through how you can support consumers in this particular period of real pressure in terms of cost of living?
Well, in terms of what we're doing, we've wrote out to all suppliers, and we're having regular meetings with suppliers just to remind them of their regulatory duties. So there's two forms of regulation. There's looking at the prices people can charge, but there's also looking at the standards they should set in terms of operating their business. And we're very clear in terms of levels of debt that there should be mechanisms that the companies have in place to support consumers through this period. So we're reminding of them of that. We're also trying to bring together the Department of Communities and Economy and CC&I just to see what more support can be brought together for this winter period. But we're looking how we can eke out things within the regulatory system. But as I say, they've just been dwarfed at the moment by the significant increases in wholesale prices.
And I guess my concern would be, you speak about debt, and maybe Noyana, you would like to reflect on this, would be those on pay-as-you-go who could end up self-disconnecting because they quite simply can't afford to heat their homes or to put in electricity. So how do you support those customers in particular?
Kevin, do you want to take? You've been meeting with the companies, if you.
Oh, Kevin, we can't hear you at the minute.
Michael, can we unmute Kevin? Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Okay?
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, the chair's right about the potential problem of self-disconnection with prepayment customers. People on normal direct debit and struggling with financial difficulties might go into debt with their energy supplier. There's all sorts of protections around people who are on debt and the requirement for energy suppliers to treat them on an individual and very fair basis. Those protections do extend to prepayment meter customers also. However, there is a potential that they self-disconnect or self-ransom. What we've been doing is we've no absolute regulatory powers to intervene in that, but what we have been doing is asking each supplier to look at the vending patterns of their prepayment meter customers, and if possible, identify and contact any customer who ceases to vend for an extended period of time, ceases to top up their meter for an extended period of time. And some suppliers are already doing that. It's very welcome. More generally, we are reiterating the message to all customers. If you are in any sort of difficulty with your energy bills, contact your supplier. They have obligations to help you set repayment plans that suit you, and obligations to refer you to debt advice agencies where you can get further help.
Okay, thanks for that. That's helpful.
Should I just from the consumer council's perspective? We've been working very closely with the utility regulator on the options that Kevin's been talking about. We also hold concern in relation to home heating oil consumers, because again, as current prices are rising in home heating oil, there's also a risk there that consumers can self-ration. And our statistics show that if consumers do run their home heating oil, they tend to be without heating for longer periods. We're currently planning in this financial year to do some further research into self-disconnection, both across prepayment meters and also looking at home heating oil to try to get a better picture of what that means for consumers.
Thanks for that. And see, just in relation to the home heating oil, and we know we have many more people here that still use heating oil, and the powers that you have are quite limited in that sphere. Is there work going on with oil providers at the minute as well, in terms of trying to at least put some pressure on in relation to competitive pricing?
Well, I can take that, Chair, if that suits. We actually believe that the market is quite competitive. There are over 280 suppliers in the home heating oil market in Northern Ireland, so I don't believe pricing is an issue. The pricing can be quite competitive. Perhaps it's transparency in pricing that may be a thing, but in our view, it's more around the standards and the wider regulation of the market that may benefit consumers. Do believe in balanced consumer protections across the entire energy market, of which home heating oil forms a significant part of in Northern Ireland. But whilst we are in favour of regulation, we believe it must be proportionate to the competition within that sector. And policy must also ensure that it's not just consumers that are transitioned onto net zero, it's the sector that successfully transitioned onto net zero as well. And to echo Peter's point around consumers and the risks of going without heat, our view is regulation should come in through perhaps a mandatory code of practice. So we did work with the Northern Ireland Oil Federation in 2013 to bring in a domestic customer charter. Now that is applicable to the members of the Northern Ireland Oil Federation, but we would be advocating for a mandate that applies to all suppliers, not just Northern Ireland Oil Federation members. And that would lead to, we believe, independent accreditation and certification that would result in higher standards, stronger technical expertise, protocols to protect vulnerable consumers, which don't exist at the moment, and also expertise to oversee the safe installation of new technologies and retrofitting of properties, which are particularly key when you look at the energy strategy and the action plan towards net zero.
Could I add one comment to that, Chair?
Go ahead.
I think it is telling that the Competition and Markets Authority, the UK-wide competition guardians across all sectors, pointed out that Northern Ireland oil consumers could benefit from enhanced regulation of the oil sector. It does make up nearly 70% of the heating in our households. Not necessarily in relation to price, not necessarily regulation in relation to price, but certainly in relation to some of those other protections we've talked about this morning. Debt advice, complaints handling, signposting to advice bodies, some of those other important protections that might be available to consumers in the home heating sector. The department have asked the question in the new energy strategy. The department have asked the question in the new energy strategy about whether the oil sector should be regulated in some way, and that's one of the key decisions to come out of the new energy strategy.
Thanks for that, and it's one of the issues that we had raised in terms of our consideration of the energy strategy and had communicated with the Competition and Markets Authority around it as well. Obviously the energy strategy is kind of the overarching piece in this, and there are really important actions that will come out of it that will hopefully deal with some of the longer term issues around fuel poverty, but I guess our focus is very much on the here and now and those that are going to be really, really struggling over the course of this winter. I'm going to bring in some other members now. Matthew, you're first up.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the home heating oil point, could someone give me a reason why, from their perspective, the home heating oil sector hasn't been regulated thus far? It is extremely bizarre that 70% of our market for home heating isn't regulated. Anyway, I don't mind who goes first.
It was just a policy decision. It was decided, it's always been decided that as Noyana says, that there's 280 odd suppliers, and competition was believed to be the best form of regulation in the time. But there's different views around that. As Noyan has mentioned, back 10 years ago, the Office of Fair Trading said they found it was peculiar, I think was the word that they used in terms of that there was no regulation for 70% of the market. And as the chair has mentioned, there's a Competition Market Authority is suggesting there needs to be regulation around this sector here.
I think part of the answer.
The thing I would add to John's point is I think there are different types of regulation we can bring in. You can be price-led or you can be standards-led, and certainly from the Consumer Council's perspective, we would be advocating raising the standards in the sector, because we believe that from a price perspective, the sector is competitive. So Kevin, sorry, I perhaps interrupted you.
Sorry, Kevin, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say that I think part of the answer is that in the rest of the UK and GB, oil is a fringe fuel. It's used to heat a very small minority of homes. Because natural gas is so extensive in GB, the vast majority of households there are covered by regulation. The issue of oil regulation was only ever really on the policy debate in a Northern Ireland context and never really got taken very far. So that's partly the answer as well, as to why it hasn't been developed in the Northern Ireland context.
Is it So, but in Britain, you can still, there are still a small, it's obviously tiny compared to here, but there are still a few percent of the population who use home heating oil, obviously usually in rural areas. Is that unregulated? If you're in the Welsh Mountains and you have is that totally unregulated as well?
There's been lots of policy discussions in GB about what they call off-grid consumer outcomes and off-grid regulation. But remember, over 80% of their households are on gas, which is heavily regulated, despite being very competitive, by the way, which is heavily regulated in terms of consumer protections and consumer outcomes. So I think that's the key thing. And from a Great Britain policy context, they're in a good place with regulation of the vast majority of their households. But there is a healthy debate about off-grid regulation as well.
So in terms of gas, in terms of the gas grid, we basically have regulation, but basically very little competition. And in terms of home heating oil, we have a lot of competition, but basically no regulation. Would that be a fair?
You have a lot of competition at the end consumer price aspect. What you do not have is any of the associated regulatory frameworks that they have, for example, in the regulated gas and electricity sectors. As I said, around debt, complaints handling, those sorts of things.
So what that means is, in terms of, for example, I'll come on in a second. I'll try and be brief, Chair, to let others in, but because there's a big question here about climate mitigation and decarbonisation. But before that, at the minute, and obviously it's not just a rural thing here. There's lots of people in Belfast who are still on, and in other big towns who aren't on the gas grid. It is the dominant form of home heating. But at the minute, if you're obviously some people will have their small family oil supplier they've been going to for years. They trust them. They have a good relationship with them, and they'll probably say, "Well, I know that person. That heating oil supplier. They're very often in small towns and villages. They're reputable people." But often there'll also be people who aren't doing that, and they're kind of they're buying oil when they need it, and they're not. Is anyone really collecting data on how, on whether there's moments of malpractice or vulnerable consumers who aren't frankly being protected? Is that data even being collected? Can it be collected with the lack of information we have at the minute?
We have no role in that sector, so we aren't collecting it.
So at the minute, sorry.
I was just going to add, we have no statutory powers in that sector, but we did. Peter referenced earlier, we did do research in June 2019. It was a quantitative study with over 1,000 consumers about their experiences of the home heating oil market, and in terms of affordability, trust and protections. When it came to affordability, 40% of oil customers struggled to pay their bills compared to 32% of electricity and 34% of gas customers. And as I referenced earlier, when customers go without oil, they tend to go without for much longer than a gas customer, primarily due to the higher upfront costs. When it came to trust, and this is specifically in relation to the survey outcomes, only 31% of customers said that they trusted their supplier to give them a fair price. And when it came to protections, only 2% of people were aware of the laws to protect consumers should they have any problems with their suppliers, and only 11% of customers they had a concern relating to their own heating oil supplier, they would know how to go about making a complaint. So that links back to Peter's point earlier on our forward work programme in terms of the research to look at vulnerability right across the energy mix and the triggers for that, and how consumers are empowered better in the future. So I don't know if that goes in some way to address your point or your question.
I think it does, and that it sort of points to what could be a kind of hidden crisis in terms of lack of information around how consumers are being treated in this market. It might be that, you know, that there is in terms of price, there's a healthy self-regulating market in the sense that there are hundreds of small suppliers, and that is, and in general, in a kind of whole of market terms, you can see the wholesale price being passed through in a relatively healthy way, but that doesn't get to the point you've just described, which is people in fuel poverty, people perhaps who have low levels of information. I'm thinking about, you know, you could have people who are relatively new entrants to this place who don't have as much information. Probably quite a unique thing for if you've just moved here to have to, you know, I know people who moved to Northern Ireland are slightly baffled from other places where they're more likely to have mains gas, and they're slightly baffled by the fact that they have to call someone up in order their. So, but at the minute we just don't really, other than this one sample, so it's concerning, frankly, and I just think, so the final point I wanted to ask for others come in is just around the decarbonisation point. I mean, it would seem, in addition to, you know, one of the big things that, as you rightly put in your presentation, is that obviously is the need to decarbonise, and part of that will be retrofitting homes and just doing energy in a completely different way. Isn't it the case that in an unregulated market, there are very few we can impose very few at the minute. We have much less power to impose statutory obligations on oil suppliers, and not only that, we have a lack of information as well.
Absolutely, I'll come in on that. I agree, you're right. And if I can just add to that, moving forward, the risk here is actually as more and more people transition to other forms of heating as a result of decarbonisation, those continuing to use home heating oil are likely to be the more vulnerable consumers who cannot afford to change to new technologies and new forms of heating. And in addition to that, others who are left behind could be those in the private rental market who don't own their homes and potentially have a scenario where landlords are unwilling to spend the necessary capital to change their heating. So we believe, which is why we've been consistent in our approach, that we do need regulation, but it needs to be delivered in a proportionate manner that not only benefits consumers but the industry itself. So
it's really important that as we move forward in the next 10, 20 years into a different energy mix, that we keep the regulatory and consumer protection frameworks appropriate for that new energy mix that's going to be developed to deliver decarbonisation. Right? Around half of all premises in Northern Ireland will never be on the gas grid because they're in rural areas and the topography doesn't suit. So technologies like heat pumps, etc., are going to become very important in the Northern Ireland context. Yeah. And part of what we need the energy strategy to be clear on is, as these new heating technologies emerge for premises in Northern Ireland, whether it's heat pumps or whatever, or biogas, biomass, that the regulatory frameworks and the consumer protection frameworks keep up with that new energy mix evolving. Because at the moment, all you've got is electricity and gas regulated, and the work of the Consumer Council cross-sectorally on top of that. But with these emerging new technologies, there's going to have to be emerging new protection frameworks to go alongside that. That's one of the key questions, again, we pose to the department to consider in the energy strategy.
But at the minute, we've got a situation where nearly 3/4 of our entire energy market isn't being regulated effectively at the minute, or regulated at all, basically, which is quite a, you know, and that's not to say, it was worth putting on the record, there are clearly lots of really reputable small oil suppliers across Northern Ireland who do, who are have long-standing customers and good relationships with their customers, etc. But that doesn't necessarily. But their existence and them being good actors doesn't mean that it's the right thing for it not to be regulated.
Thank you. And members, just to remind, we are tight for time, so we can keep comments concise. John, you're in next.
Yeah, it's quite obvious as a result of this conversation and other conversations that the home heating oil market needs regulation. We're having a conversation now which 60% of the population are not represented in terms of their home heating. And it's largely an urban discussion because gas is an urban supply, so we need to be representing all our society, including the rural communities, through this. In relation to net zero, there will be many families this winter achieving net zero because they won't be burning any fuel because they can't afford it. So I think there'll be many families scratching their heads, understandably and frustrated, when they hear calls for net zero and decarbonisation and all those things that need to happen. But if you can't heat your family home, it's all meaningless to you. So what we have to do is do something in the short term to protect those families, low income, low middle income families as well, from these once in a lifetime price rises. So the question I want to put is this. During the COVID pandemic, the ongoing COVID pandemic, we introduced emergency legislation to protect tenants from eviction. We introduced emergency legislation to protect businesses from going bankrupt. We introduced a range of emergency legislation, and quite rightly so, to protect people in those circumstances. Do we require emergency legislation to protect gas customers, electricity customers, and oil customers from being torn off this winter?
I think we need to help consumers through this winter. Undoubtedly, this is, I think there's two elements to the price shock. There's the lack of benefits and how cheap energy was last year. So it's a double whammy in terms of people's pockets. So they're lacking the benefits, and there's been an increase in energy costs. In terms of emergency legislation, maybe I haven't thought about that, to be honest. The thing is, in terms of the wholesale energy price, it has to be paid by someone, as that's what the commodity costs. So it's deciding, from a policy perspective, who pays that cost. So is that the consumer? Is that government that helps them with interventions to afford that energy? Underline this: if we're asking the companies to pay for it, we've got to see whether we've seen in GB companies going bust because they cannot supply at the cost they're being asked to supply at. So it's a wider perspective in terms of what is affordable, and all of those, I guess, are policy decisions.
I think if we're going to do something for consumers, it needs to be urgent, and it needs to be this winter, because the prices rises have happened and will continue to happen for the next month or two, and we are coming into the winter. So if there is money available in government circles for urgent hardship intervention to help whatever targeted group we talk about, people on benefits, whatever, vulnerable consumers, we need to move quickly as a jurisdiction and do something quickly. And that's, I suppose, the message we've been talking to the relevant government departments about, and trying to convey to them this is a once in a generation price crisis that warrants a very real discussion about urgent intervention to help needy people.
Just a final comment. I think we could do it this winter. We've introduced emergency legislation before. With no control over VAT, which I think is an option for Westminster. With no control over taxation, which I think is an option for Westminster. But we do have a control over how and when and why utility companies cut off people from heating their homes. And as I said before, it's not just people on benefits. I see young families around me, both of whom the parents are working. They're not going to be able to afford these price rises. No. Okay.
Thanks, John. Mike?
Chair, thank you. Question for you, John, and it's probably the flip side of what John O'Dowd was asking. What happens if a an energy supplier goes bust?
Well, we have procedures in place called supplier of last resort. So in electricity, if a supply goes bust, they will move on to Power NI, and in gas, they will move to the either SSE in Belfast and the West, and Firmus in the 10 Towns area.
So there's no possibility that a household would not have access to gas or electricity?
No, it happened a few years ago. There was a company called Open Electric. I think it went bust towards the end of 2016, and at Christmas of 2016, and they all successfully moved from their supplier Open Electric onto Power NI, and it's the same process that occurs in GB with, you've seen those 20 companies go bust. They have supplier of last resort that they move to another company who will then take on the supply of both electricity and gas to those businesses and households.
Okay. I think you've been in the public space warning of more eye-watering percentage increases in costs. So in terms of the typical household annual cost for gas, should we be preparing the public for that figure to go into four figures, 1,000 plus per annum?
Current, I don't think it'll go as high as that, but that's on an average household. So obviously, if you use more gas as a household, you'll probably find your bills are obviously more expensive. But at the moment, it will be over £900, but I don't think it'll go over the £1,000 mark. Saying that, natural gas, heating oil is above that already. Heating oil is as Peter or Noyona might want to say, but we are seeing significantly high gas prices.
Okay, thank you.
In the last
Sorry.
we've seen the Consumer Council track heating oil, gas and electricity prices as they impact the consumer. And in the month of October, from the start of October to the end of October, the price to consumers of heating their homes has increased by 70%, according to our index. So that's a really significant figure. And it looks as though, as John has mentioned, that it's going to continue to increase. So if you look at a combination level of your home heating price alongside the rise in electricity and the rise in petrol costs, the average consumer is looking at bills just shy of that £1,000 mark.
Sorry, did you say?
Can I just add one thing?
Did you say 70%? 70?
Yes. So in the month of October, 70%.
Thank you.
Can I just
Can I just add one thing to that? It's really important that the committee recognise this isn't just a short-term blip. It's going to last a few weeks or a month or two. These prices are now forecast to be locked in for the rest of this winter and indeed in the next spring. So I think we just need to be really realistic and clear that once all these price rises come through, they're going to stay at high levels for some time, and there won't be any short-term respite in terms of prices falling back down again. Our system of regulation is very transparent, and we will put through price falls as soon as we can, as soon as the underlying wholesale commodity allow us to. But that won't be for some time, and I think we all just need to be realistic that this problem we're talking about, is going to last for some months, at least.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Can I just ask, in relation to the supplier of last resort, if an energy company did unfortunately go bust, does the supplier of last resort have to take on all the customers? So anybody who would potentially be in debt would be moved on to, for example, Power NI in the case of electricity?
John, do you want me to pick that up?
Yeah.
So the arrangements, particularly on the electricity side, have been well developed over many years, tested and indeed used in anger several years ago, as John said. And all customers will be transferred overnight. Supply will not be interrupted. They'll go on to the new terms with Power NI, and they will have the right to move on to other suppliers in due course if they don't want to stay with Power NI. Any credit balances they have will usually be protected. and all the protections are in place to make sure customers see no negative consequences from a supplier of a last resort event. The systems in gas are a bit less IT developed, let's call it that, but we're working on that. And the supplier of last resort arrangements do already exist in gas, and indeed we're tested this year for the first time with the gas companies, tested successfully this year for the first time with the gas companies.
Thanks for that. Can we bring Peter into the spotlight, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To some extent, I think most of the questions I was looking to ask have been covered, so but just maybe be a little bit of a brief comment. It does seem to me that there's a mixture here of looking at the long-term solutions in terms of energy policy and consumer regulation, with, I think, probably our focus is largely speaking on, I think, what you rightly described as the here and now. And I suppose there's a lot of frustration that a lot of the major interventions, that the levers are outside of our hands, whether it's on wider taxation issues or indeed the extent to which we are party to whatever, if you like, games that will go on between Russia and Germany, for instance, on the issue. I suppose I'll just make 2 points very, very quickly. In terms of obviously the interventions that we can do, I think we need to be careful that we don't leave people in a certain level of cliff edge. And to that extent, therefore, while it's important to have those levels of protection for people who would fall just outside in terms of like a benefits trap, that this will also hit a lot of squeezed middle, people in the squeezed middle as well. And it's important, therefore, that we don't simply reach a point at which there's a level of interventions, and then if you're just the wrong side of a line, that you get into difficulties there. And secondly, I suppose that in terms of solutions, it is about ensuring that we don't take anything off the table. I listened to John's comments in relation to emergency legislation to ensure that people are not cut off, which I think is again something to be considered. But that in and of itself will not provide the solution for a lot of people, because that will also leave a lot of people who will feel they don't want to get into debt. People will be faced at times with a heating or eating type solution situation, and as such, simply the fact that they aren't getting cut off, people will still make levels of sacrifices which maybe they can't afford to be able to meet that. So I think in terms of, I was looking to get thoughts in terms of earlier interventions. I think, to be honest, in terms of the earlier questions, both the Regulator and the Consumer Council have largely covered those. So I'm happy to move on the basis of those comments.
Thanks, Peter. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Just one other area in relation to regulation, and Matthew made a comment around the home heating oil, and I think that's been an issue which has been rumbling on in the background for quite some time, bearing in mind the size and proportion of the number of consumers for home heating oil. But there's another element that actually I have received probably more constituency queries and questions about, and that's LPG. That's either cylinder gas or the large tanks and gardens. Totally unregulated, highly expensive, and is in urgent need of regulation. And I think we need to look at a fundamental review of those areas that we are regulating. And I appreciate that over 50% of home heating oil has the potential to be regulated. There are other niche areas that need to be looked at as well. So just my own consistency perspective, LPG has come up on a number of occasions with me. Just two very brief comments, Chair. I appreciate the work that the Consumer Council and the Regulator do by encouraging people to shop around, but that really today is tinkering at the edges. There's really very little to be gained. That's not to suggest you shouldn't do it, but there's very little to be gained, and in fact there's potentially a lot of nervousness because others like you, Chair, have been saying what happens if other companies, everybody moves to the cheapest and then they just discover they're not sustainable any longer. So we need to refine that message further, and we need to be seeing what more things both the Consumer Council and the Regulator can come up with by way of energy saving advice as opposed to energy cost advice. It might be a more appropriate area. And just a final general comment. There's very little, I believe that we do well in regulating the prices in Northern Ireland and broadly in terms of the conversations we've had this morning, the reality is this is an international issue, and much of it may very well be big nations gouging prices in advance of a sea change in what fuel will be in the future. Correct. If you're Russia or a coal supplying country, you're going to have to, after this week of COP26, you're going to have heard the message. Your oil and gas and coal is staying in the ground forever. We don't want it anymore. And that's partly some of the reason why these countries are starting to gouge on prices. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Can I perhaps come in on a couple of points if that suits, Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. In relation, it's a really good point around LPG. There's very little, again, we don't have statutory powers in it, but we are undertaking research this year, and that will be completed before February, on the impact of the LPG market on energy consumers, small businesses and not-for-profit organisations. So we will get a better understanding of the concerns that has just been outlined. In addition to that, and parallel to that, we are also going to be looking at experiences and attitudes of energy consumers in the mix, particularly those most vulnerable as a result of the pandemic. As well as fuel poverty, the latest fuel poverty levels in Northern Ireland and the trigger around that. And finally, in terms of, I totally agree in refining the message around shopping around. And one of the things that we're in train doing is delivering online efficiency training for domestic energy consumers. And we hope to have that ready in the next couple of months this winter. So I just wanted to make those observations in response to the points made. Thank you.
Keith.
Yeah, just a quick question, Chair, and I appreciate the time. Thank you, Naona and John. My question's to John. John, you talked about, obviously you're monitoring gas, electricity suppliers. What do you do in respect to generation of electricity? Do you have any input at all or any communication or conversations with those that generate? And obviously you're down, 62% of wind generation, so obviously their generation's gone up. So the question is, what communication do you have with the generators, and what control have you, if any, on those?
Well, we have a lot of conversations with the generators. We do that on an all-island basis as part of the single electricity market. We have the market monitoring unit here in Belfast that is part of that monitors the prices that generators bid into the market, and we will check that on a regular basis. And there's generally about 5 to 6 investigations ongoing at any point in time in terms of how generators have bid into the market to make sure that that's fair and they're doing it on an economic basis and they're covering actual costs and they're not trying to inflate the cost of the market. So there's that constant conversation with generators, but as it's a market that's unlike supply businesses. We cannot set, as I said, price margins at the moment. That's undertaken through competition, that competition should be the best form of regulation. It's believed in the generation sector.
And one final question, if I may, Chair. With respect to the renewables sector, I think it's 47%. Obviously no wind, no power of the year, for example. Where do you see, and maybe there's a strange way of putting it, the maximum we can go with renewable energy based on the fact you still need generation of whatever time in the background if that doesn't work or that doesn't happen? So the whole argument on battery storage, renewables and still backup generation, whether that be whatever, where do you see that going?
Well, I think, that's a good question. I think I know the target at the moment, potentially in the new energy strategy, is to look at 70% renewables by 2030. We just need to be very careful what renewables we bring online, because this year we've seen, with the lack of wind, lack of, the dark days, that energy prices have soared because we've had to use conventional generation behind that. So I think it's very clear that all renewable generation isn't equal, and we need to see where we can use less intermittent sources of generation, like onshore wind. So looking towards the more hydro, tidal, and that the steady flow that can be turned on all the time, regardless of the wind flows. So I think we need to be very careful as we take the strategy forward that we ensure that the renewables that we bring on are to the benefit of consumers here in Northern Ireland.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thanks. John, just a question in relation to the 2%. So mathematically speaking, if prices go up, companies get more profits because it's a percentage. Is that the most appropriate, I guess, means of regulation?
And we're mindful of that at the moment, and we're looking to see what more can be done. The Competition Markets Authority, as I said, have set the benchmark, kind of saying the lowest we can charge is 1.9%. But, we're trying to say to companies, look, morally, we think might have an obligation here to, there's nothing we can do from a regulation perspective, but morally, is there anything you can do to help consumers through this winter period?
Okay. And then just the final question is in relation to fuel poverty. Has there been any analysis of how many more households here will be in fuel poverty in the context of the rise in prices?
I don't know if Noyona wants to say anything, but all I can say is, those figures that Noyona said about 2011 when fuel poverty was 44%. If you look back at those tables that were in our presentation, you see the energy prices are in around that price. So, we would, just as a rule of thumb, you'd probably to see, a significant increase in fuel poverty coming into this winter period.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I suppose that's why the programme for this year to look at the most current levels of fuel poverty, mindful of the impact of the pandemic, because the figures that are being quoted at the moment, the 22%, Peter can keep me right, that is from 2016, and the 18% is from 2018, or the further modelling, which is 2018. So they're not current figures, and they don't take into account of the impact of the pandemic or the recent price rises or the squeeze on consumer incomes. Hence why we want to do this research now, but I don't have up-to-date figures. Apologies.
No, that's helpful in itself. I think that's everything from members for this morning. So look, thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure we will be in conversation with you over the next number of weeks as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Peter, just coming out of that, there's probably a number of actions that we want to take. First of all, can we ask DFE around the emissions trading scheme, and if we are able to access that funding through virtue of the protocol, because we're still within it. And then secondly, if the committee would agree to write to the appropriate minister, which I think is the BES Secretary of State,
check up on that.
in relation to the interventions potentially regarding VAT, windfall taxes, those sort of things. Does members have any other things that they would like to add to that?
The economy minister may not be the appropriate minister, but would we write to the minister and ask him, has he or would he consider introducing or strengthening the powers of the utility regulator to protect consumers in face of these ongoing price rises, and the lessons are learned from COVID response in terms of how we ensure that people aren't being cut off. Even if it's a 6 months period until we get in a position where we are have some sort of plan to deal with this, because at the minute people are being left very, very vulnerable.
Chair, I suppose to what the department has already reflected on around the energy strategy is they know that there's a clear awareness that the role and remit of the regulator is not fit for purpose any longer. So the department may well already be drafting, so it may be easier to do than perhaps we thought, but we'll ask just how quickly that could be done, where it is, and so on.
Just looking at the slide, it says the board and the chair are appointed by finance, but accountable to the assembly.
It's an non-departmental body. I was trying to look for.
It needs, again, that's part of the restructuring where you would look to perhaps model it on the NIPSO, where they become an officer of the assembly, and therefore there's a much clearer appointment role and accountability to the assembly directly, in that relationship then directly with committees. There's, as I say, I'm assuming there's work that's been done by the regulator themselves and also by the Consumer Council as to how that needs to move. But the department should be thinking about it as part of the energy strategy. Because it's been discussed for a long time now, and it's very clear that the rules are not fit for purpose, as members have said. It's untidy and has been due modernisation, but the hiatus got in the way of that. But there's certainly useful models out there, such as the Audit Office or the NIPSO, where there's already that relationship with the Assembly. So, Chair, we'll pursue that and bring that back, and hopefully it can be part of the discussion as well around the energy strategy and making the system work more effectively.
Chair, what's the time frame for the energy strategy?
So the latest we had when officials were here last was they're anticipating bringing it forward in early December. We previously thought it would be the end of last month. That was the timeline for quite some time, but when the officials were last with it, they were talking early December.
There was a suggestion, Chair, that it might have appeared for the COP26 period.
I think that had been the long-term timescale when they introduced the timescale first. There was a logical coming together then, but the latest from officials was early December.
Is that a failure, or is that?
It's really not for me to comment, but I think there's a number of additional factors are now having to be considered, as has been reflected by members and witnesses. We are living in remarkable times, so I think there are issues that weren't necessarily there before. There are now weather cycles that need to be considered, and all sorts of other issues. So I think that has had an impact. Also, just picking up on what the regulator said about being mindful of types of renewables, there was very little discussion previously around tidal. That has now become incredibly important and needs to be considered, and those conversations have never really been there in the past. So again, that's another issue that needs to be addressed with the strategy. So I think it's additional complication that has all converged, has pushed the timeline. But early December is what we're being told at the minute.
You would imagine, in terms of the principle of regulation, if you supply energy to family home or businesses, you're regulated.
Yeah.
So that would be something.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. Well, the committee has been talking about the issue around home heating regulation for the last 2 years, really, since the committee got up and running again, and have written and done all the research, and we know the issues. We've addressed the issues to the department, to departments in GB, to the regulator, and to the Consumer Council. So they're well rehearsed, and the expectation is that this will all have to be moved on as part of the strategy. Chair, I'm conscious we now have our bill office clerks.
So
if
we're
you
going into closed session.
want to move into closed session, Chair, that would be.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Can we bring the officials into the meeting?
So, Chair, we're just bringing the officials back in. They were there and we put them out for the closed session because that's how the system works. So we're now full picture and live, and the officials will be aware we're here. So they're going to be logging back in again. And that will happen. There's Colin, and we're looking just for Kelly and Lawrence to appear as if by magic as well. So we have Colin. Colin, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
So, Colin, if I can just, with the Chair's indulgence, just explain what's happened. We have been in closed session discussion with the bill clerks, and we have a couple of points of clarification that members want to seek from you. So once we have Kelly and Lawrence, we will do that. They're based on the letter from Sharon Nadallo that I'm assuming you have in front of you.
I do.
Okay, so there's Kelly, and we're just waiting for Lawrence.
probably go ahead with Kelly and myself.
We do that then. If Lawrence appears, so much the better. But Chair, if you want to address the issue that's been raised around parity in the letter.
Okay, so hi Kelly and hi Colin. So we've just had some discussion around our proposed amendments and the one that was put forward by the department as well. And just wanted to clarify the point in the letter in relation to the day one right and the sentence that reads, it's a well understood principle that breaking parity could render NI liable for any subsequent increases introduced by the UK government attempting to restore parity. So could we just ask for a little bit of clarification as to what that actually means?
Okay, well, our understanding is that there is a principle of parity in terms of social security payments and so on, and these payments, these statutory family-related payments are regarded as part of that arrangement. And there is an agreement, as we understand it, between the Department of Finance and the Treasury that should Northern Ireland make greater provision on a particular measure that is in excess of that in the rest of the UK, there could be a requirement on the executive to pay the analogous costs for the whole of the UK, not just for Northern Ireland. Now, Kelly, is that your understanding as well?
Yes, Chair, just to say to you, because I looked into this with my Department for Communities colleagues, it's actually where it states is it's the Treasury Consolidated Budget Guidance. They have a statement of funding policy every year, and there's a section in there that deals with policies that affect other departments' spending. So this is obviously a very high-level document between Treasury and Finance here and the other devolved administrations, but people who have dealt with these kind of budgets before would be well versed on this parity issue. And the only thing to say in addition to what Colin has said, which is my understanding also, is that obviously the Northern Ireland Executive, they would only become liable to pay for the whole of the UK if, in response to us doing something more favourable for people in Northern Ireland here, GB thought it was untenable for them not to, and they had to follow suit. Then the issue of parity comes into play. And in something as emotive as this, you might say that might be the case.
Okay. Has there been examples of this having happened?
I'm certainly not aware of any in DFE. That's all that I can speak of. Colin, you might know of wider, broader issues.
No, we would need to make inquiries about whether there have been specific examples where this has been invoked.
And tell me this, would they have to prove that they took action because we took action? And would that have to be done legally?
I mean, it's an agreement that is controlled by the Treasury. So, I'm not sure to what extent they would be looking into a lot of legal detail about it. I mean, they would have the ability to decide, and I imagine it would be a ministerial decision in the Treasury whether to invoke it or not.
Okay. Mike, you want it?
Yes, thank you. Can either of you explain to me, if you're right, why the UK government didn't adopt the same welfare mitigations that we have adopted and send us the bill?
Well, I suppose the question that we weren't asked before, but the answer is there have been instances where this principle, as we understand it, could have been invoked where it hasn't been invoked. And so that would be one of those situations.
My observation on that one, Mike, is that while we would need to obviously check with DFC colleagues to be absolutely aware, but my observation is that it was actually a UK government stance to remove the welfare mitigations. That was a choice that they made to do. The fact then that the Northern Ireland Executive decided that they were not prepared to do that and keep certain bits in is a different scenario to one that we're talking about here, in that we have decided to enhance provision. It would be normal practice in employment law that there's a 26-week qualifying period for pay. So what we're deciding is to enhance protections, and if then, based on what our actions, GB feels it's untenable for them to hold the position, the long-standing position they have had, they may feel the need to enhance theirs as well. I think that's just a very slightly different nuance to the welfare situation.
Yeah. But my understanding is employment is fully devolved, so we have the ability to break parity as such with what is done in Britain in respect of employment.
I think that there's scope for some argument on this issue, and the Minister's position is that there is a risk that this principle, a real legal risk, that this principle could be invoked on this issue, but it's not a certainty. So, I mean, there is room for argument about whether it would be invoked or not.
Okay, no, that's helpful, Stuart.
Just following on from what Mike was commenting on in relation to welfare mitigations, prescription charges in Northern Ireland are free and they're paid for in England. But also just going back to employment law, in the past, time limits for unfair dismissal were different here than the rest of the UK because we do have the evolution of employment law. Nobody sought to seek any retribution against us in respect of that.
Yeah, I think the distinction between those two issues and this one is that this is closely related to the benefit system, to the administration by revenue and customs of these payments and so on. So I don't think either prescription charges or prescription charges, there's a clear financial aspect to it. My understanding is they wouldn't be covered by this principle. The difference on time periods for consultation on unfair for unfair dismissal and for consultation and collective redundancy and so on are differences in employment law that I suppose don't have direct financial consequences or not for the executive. Well, the consultation period, I mean, they're costs perhaps for the employers, but I mean, they're in the scope of, they're devolved issues and decisions were taken to do things in Northern Ireland.
We're not talking about consultation periods. We're talking about the right to bring a complaint of unfair dismissal was changed from 6 months to 26 weeks to 2 years, but those time changes didn't happen in Northern Ireland. Yeah.
No, they didn't. But this is a financial protocol that we're talking about in this case.
Arguably, people were better off here, and employers had to pay more here.
Well, I suppose people have stronger employment rights as a result of those changes not having been made in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
But
and that's all. That's all this legislation. That's all. This payment is seeking to do as well is to give people enhanced rights.
But it's making payments from the consolidated fund, which is a different scenario.
With respect, Chair, a line in a letter from the department just doesn't cut it. I think we would require substantial chapter, verse and legal advice with respect to that matter.
Thanks, Stuart. Peter wants to come in, so can we bring Peter in? There we go, thank you.
Sorry, Jerry, you referring to myself?
Yes.
No, I think I'd indicated earlier, just in terms of the parity issue, and it's maybe previous, but
no problem. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, thank you. Just Colin, I missed that other lady's name. My apologies.
Kelly.
Sorry.
Kelly.
On the paragraph in that letter you referred to, obviously it's a legal risk with significant financial liability. Do you have any idea what that is? So if that is factually correct, Do you know what that financial liability could be in pounds and pence, theoretically?
We would be able to calculate it because it would be based on the Barnett. I mean, Northern Ireland's cost would be 3% roughly of the total UK cost, and I suppose we have estimated the we have estimated the cost of the day one right to pay. Kelly, do you have that figure to hand? We can certainly come back to the committee with that figure.
I don't have it to hand just at the moment.
But we have done the calculations that would let us give you that.
Would it be good to know what that financial liability could or could not be, depending whether it's factually correct in the letter or not, but it'd be good to know what the financial figure is, or approximately is. Thanks, Jane.
Okay.
Okay, I don't have anybody else indicating. Michael, you want to come in? No? That's okay. So thank you for the clarification. I think we're going to go back into closed session now for some further deliberation. So.
Thank you, officials.
Will you require us again, Chair, do you think?
We're not sure, Chair, but if you can remain available, that would be really helpful.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Sorry, hold on a sec. Go ahead,
Colin,
Mike.
is there a figure for day one rights in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, yes, there is.
And what is that?
I don't have it to hand right now, but I mean, I could have it if we come back on again.
It's in one of the letters.
We have it in one of the letters.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have given the committee that figure before.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Look for that.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Okay, members, so we are back in live session.
Just takes it a second to come up in picture.
Okay.
And there we are.
So we are now going to proceed through the clauses of the bill and put the questions in formally, and members will have an opportunity to formally consider the clauses then again at our next meeting. So just to advise members that where there are amendments, I'll put a question on the amendment first of all. If there's not consensus on the questions, then we'll ask members to vote through a show of hands, and the clerk will confirm the result of each vote. So we're going to move into our clauses. Clause 1, parental bereavement leave. Members indicated that they were minded to amend Clause 1 to provide for leave and pay for miscarriage to be introduced 12 months from royal assent. So is the committee content with Amendment 1?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So moving on then to Clause 2, which is parental bereavement pay. Members indicated that they were minded to amend Clause 2 to provide for miscarriage. So is the committee content with Amendment 2?
Yes.
Thank you.
Members indicated that they were minded to amend Clause 2 to remove the 26-week eligibility criteria. So is the committee content with Amendment 7?
Yes.
No.
So, Chair, what we can do then is we can register that there is not consensus on that and can leave a vote until Monday when we do this formally.
Okay. So then, is the committee content with clause 2 as amendment, and that it will be both amendments,
Yes.
So again, that's
2 and 7?
2 and 7. So there'd be dissent around 7. So we can register that again as well.
Okay. So moving on then to clause 3, further amendments to the parental bereavement leave and pay bill. So is the committee content with clause 3 as drafted?
Yep, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so clause 4 then is commencement. Members indicated that they were minded to amend clause 4 to provide for miscarriage. So is the committee content with amendments 3 and 4 in respect of that?
Yes.
And thank you.
Okay, good. Clause 5 then is the short title. So is the committee content with clause 5 as drafted?
Yep,
Yes.
thank you.
And then we're moving on to Schedule 1, further amendments to the parental bereavement leave and pay bill, and members indicated they were minded to amend Schedule 1 to provide for miscarriage. So is the committee content with amendments 5 and 6?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that is,
That's our informal clause by clause, Chair. So we will now, that allows us to do a bit more for the bill report. So we have an additional meeting scheduled for Monday morning at 10.
okay.
Putting that out there. We will follow up with that, but that can be as members want it. We will physically find a room, but members can be zoomed in virtually and so on because we have capacity for that. I'm saying all of this now. We will make sure that is true and in place. But 10 o'clock on Monday morning, so we can do the formal clause by clause then, and our plan would be to give you a copy of the bill report at that stage and go through that. Again, finalising all of that on the 10th on Wednesday. But it means you will at least get an almost entire draft of the bill report to be able to look at. And we'll maybe try and confirm some of the elements of that are standard, such as powers and membership and a reflection of what the bill actually says. So essentially the bill report will also go clause by clause and say this clause does. So we'll try and clear as much of that as possible to leave recommendation discussion then for Wednesday. How that usually works is the committee puts into recommendation the issues that have been raised with it and asks the department to look at those so we can have that discussion and members can see whether they're content with that. So, Chair, if you want to go on ahead then with item
Number 6. Okay, so item number 6, the small scale green energy bill. There is correspondence from the bill sponsor, John O'Dowd, at page 166, clarifying that the bill as drafted only allows for a major electricity provider to be defined by their market share, but does not set the market share at 5%. It is the intention of the bill sponsor to bring forward an amendment at consideration stage to clarify this in the bill. And then there is also a response from Action Renewables at page 167 to the request for written submissions on the bill, and it will be included as part of the written submissions. Actions Renewables suggests the timing of the bill is premature, and the response sets out that legislating in advance of the energy strategy without consideration of renewable energy support in the round could result in a suboptimal outcome. A RAISE paper on the small scale green energy bill is at page 168. RAISE will present this paper to the committee on the 17th of November, but the paper is very detailed, so it has been included in this week's pack to allow members time to consider it before the RAISE hearing on the 17th. And then there's a copy of the Hansard of the 20th of October at page 224. So those are for members to note at this stage. Moving on then to matters arising, page 227, there's a response from Tourism NI to the issues raised by an individual in correspondence to the committee around the impact of flags on tourism. The response states that Tourism NI is not aware of work ongoing to assess the impact of flags on the tourism industry. So members are content, we will forward that to the individual. Then page 228, there is a response from the Finance Minister to the committee's letter regarding issues faced by local airports around the domestic aviation kickstart scheme and air passenger duty. The Minister states that DOF has no ongoing policy responsibility in terms of aviation or airports. NIDAX was a scheme launched solely by DFE and the expenditure for this was approved under a ministerial direction. The Minister adds that any further steps to develop scheduled long-haul routes which are no longer operated from local airports, including using marketing support, would be a matter for DFE. The Department has announced this week that NIDAX, and that's the Department for Economy, has assisted 3 further airlines and that the Department is now considering its future. The Department has not yet formally replied to our correspondence. So that's for members to note. Then at page 3 of table papers, there's a copy of a written ministerial statement by the Finance Minister regarding the funding made available for the 2022-25 budget as notified by the Secretary of State on the 29th of October. So that's again for members to note. Then at page 7 of table papers, there's a response from the Department providing clarification in relation to £40 million of unique circumstances funding under New Decade New Approach. The Department has provided the information in relation to the bids it made, but states that it has no correspondence yet on the outcome. So if members are content, we will forward this response to the Finance Committee, who had raised this matter with us, and to ask if it has any further information on the outcome of the process.
Good. Yep.
And then page 8 of table papers, there's a copy of correspondence from the Department to the Finance Committee regarding DFE's negative capital expenditure outturn numbers in both April 2020 and November 2020. The Department states that the figures reported for negative capital expenditure in April and November last year have arisen mainly as a result of receipts in respect of the loan to the Presbyterian Mutual Society. For April 2022, the amount received was £14.5 million, with the remaining £3.2 million arising due to the reversal of opening accounting adjustments accruals relating to the capital expenditure rather than the disposal of capital assets. And for November 2020, the amount received from the Presbyterian Mutual Society was £17.3 million, offset by capital additions of £3.23 million. So, members content to note.
Yep.
Then page 9 of table papers, there's a copy of correspondence from the Department to the Communities Committee regarding the private tenancies bill and links with the energy strategy. The Department confirms that the energy strategy is being finalised to be tabled for executive approval and sets out measures relating to energy efficiency and improving health outcomes for the most vulnerable. So that's to note. Moving on then to correspondence, at page 232 of our packs, there's a copy of the 12-month review of the early conciliation, which the Department is required to lay under Section 9 of the Employment Act. That's just for members to note. Then page 271, there's a copy of correspondence from the Department to the Infrastructure Committee in response to issues it raised regarding the lack of HGV driver initiatives being considered at a local level by the Department for Communities in partnership. Sorry, have I read that wrong?
Just missed out a wee bit.
The Department, points to apprenticeship training opportunities and states that there are a number of HGV driver initiatives being considered at a local level by the Department for Communities in partnership with councils. So it'd be useful maybe to get an update on that at some point, Peter.
Yeah, Chair, we have a standing request in for any details and any schemes like that, so we just reiterate that.
Great. Then page 273, there is a copy of correspondence from the Finance Committee to the Department seeking clarity in relation to the negative capital expenditure outturn numbers in both April and November, which we have just referred to in our matters arising. Then page 274, there's a copy of correspondence from the Finance Committee to the Economy Minister seeking views on the proposed EU directive on energy taxation and details of the Department's scrutiny of the related legislation. So the committee will be copied into correspondence. We've asked Kelly to stay on, and she's still there.
Sorry, Chair. Kelly, we thank you for your diligence, but we won't need to speak to you again. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so moving on then to 8.5, page 284, there's correspondence from the Communities Committee regarding a response from the Department on the UK Government's current plans for the introduction of a gas and oil boiler ban on new build homes from 2025. The committee already noted the Department's response at our meeting on the 20th of October, so that's for members to note. Then at page 287, there's a copy of correspondence from the Speaker to the Chairperson's Liaison Group regarding legislative pressures in the Assembly and the fact that there are a minimum of 79 bill stages to schedule, with only 40 expected plenary sittings before the end of the mandate. So that's just for members to note.
Chair, just on that, members will recall previously when the committee agreed to have a committee stage end date of the 20th of January for the small-scale green energy bill. I'd mentioned at that point that any subsequent PMB coming, we would also put that same end date. I've had a think about that, and I'm assuming that if everyone is doing that, then you are going to get a huge glut coming at the end of January. So we might think again about further committee stages ending slightly after that, because there's no point in it ending at the end of January if it can't then go on to consideration stage at that point, but it might be able to go on at a later stage. So we'll do some work around that, Chair, to see if that's actually workable.
John.
It's not a month for this committee, but we have a significant amount of legislation going through the Assembly. But we have an open-ended debating system in the Assembly when it comes to bills. Members at second stage, consideration stage, and further consideration stage, and at the final stage, can speak for as long as they want.
Yeah.
And the debate can go on for hours and hours and hours. And in some instances, you have 3 or 4 people who take up a significant amount of that stage. So I think the Assembly as a body is going to have to look at how we scrutinise legislation. It's not the quantity of scrutiny, it's the quality of scrutiny we should be looking at.
Agreed. Okay, so moving on then, 8.7, page 298, there's correspondence from Rachel Woods, MLA, offering to brief the committee on her domestic abuse safe leave bill in advance of the second stage debate in the Assembly. So if members are content, we'll seek to schedule that for the 24th of November.
Okay.
Then page 299, there's a copy of correspondence from the Minister for Work and Pensions to the Chair of the NI Protocol Subcommittee regarding issues raised by the CHEM Trust on the potential impact on trade between Britain and the North. Britain diverges from the latest update to the EU's CLP regulations relating to labelling and packaging of substances and mixtures. The Minister states that the Government is seeking to find a new balance in the protocol in order to place it on a more sustainable footing. This includes proposals to establish a dual regulatory regime in order to ensure that consumers in the North do not face barriers in accessing goods from Britain, which would enable goods made to UK rules to circulate and be placed on the market here in the North. In such a scenario, the EU's CLP regulation would apply only where goods were to be made to EU rules in order to be able to access both the North market and the EU market, and the British CLP regulation would be extended to cover the North. So in relation to movements from here to Britain, the Government's commitments to the North's unfettered access to the British market will continue. And just to advise members that other issues raised by the CHEM Trust, including around the costs of divergence and on consultation with the devolved administrations, are outlined in detail at pages 300 to 304. So those are for members to note. And I have no idea if I'm saying CHEM Trust right.
I think that's fine, Chair. I think that's fine.
And 8.9 then, at page 305, there is a copy of correspondence from the Lord Mayor of Belfast to the Minister for Education regarding structured education provision for young refugee and asylum seekers who have limited English. This correspondence is also copied to the Economy Minister, so that's for members to note. Then page 309, there's correspondence from Derry City and Strabane District Council in support of the Parental Bereavement Leave and Pay Bill and urging the committee to extend the legislation to include everyone who's bereaved of a close relative or partner. So if members are content, this response will be included as part of the written submission in the committee's bill report. And obviously that issue is one that we were briefed on by the Coalition of Bereaved Workers.
Chair, yeah, it's already highlighted in the report. This is just further evidence.
Moving on then to page 310, there's a copy of correspondence from BES to the chair of the NI Protocol Subcommittee, providing clarification in relation to the application of Article 10 of the Protocol to regulations regarding certain categories of aid. The response states that the British Government's position, as set out in the command paper of the 21st of July, is that Article 10 of the Protocol is redundant in its current form. This would mean that EU state aid rules referenced in Annex 5 of the Protocol would cease to apply as they do now. The British Government would be prepared to establish enhanced processes for any subsidies on a significant scale relating to the North, and, for example, enhanced referral powers or consultation procedures for subsidies within scope to enable EU concerns to be properly and swiftly addressed. So that's for members to note. And then 8.12 and 8.14 at page 312 and 316 respectively are correspondence from Logistics NI and the British International Freight Association regarding the implementation of the new customs declaration service for the rest of the world imports into the North. The new CDS system was implemented from the end of October. However, Logistics NI highlights serious difficulties due to insufficient notice and training. The British Freight Association's members in the North highlight serious concerns and call for a delay to its implementation. It is suggested that the new system will not meet the needs of the forwarding community in the North and could further disrupt already difficult supply chains. So if members are content, and I met with some customs agents on this last week and got a briefing about it, and I think from my understanding, even though it was introduced at the beginning of this week, the issues haven't really started to impact yet because the old system was used for shippings that are landing this week. So it will be by the end of this week that some of the issues might begin to arise. So if members are content that we would write to HMRC to see if there are any mitigations that can be implemented as a matter of urgency, to write to the Executive Office and also to the department to ask what is being done to address the issue and to raise awareness of the issue across the economy, and to write to Belfast Harbour to ensure practical contingency plans are in place on the ground and that any costs to traders are minimised should imports be seriously delayed by the introduction of the new system. Are members content?
Good.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so moving on then to page 314, there's correspondence from a caravan owner regarding the issue of owners being required to purchase new caravans or being forced to leave a caravan site. This issue has been raised with the committee previously, and at that stage the committee had concluded that although it recognised the distress being caused by two caravan owners, it was a commercial or contractual legal matter. So members are content that we would write to the Consumers Council to ask for its view on whether there is any intervention that can be made or any form of redress available.
Chair, just a brief intervention in respect to that. The current caravan legislation is due for review and is due for review jointly between this committee and the Communities Committee. What action has been taken in respect of that?
Chair, we will find out what departments have done around bringing forward the review and come back to committee with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Didn't John McAllister famously pass a private member's bill?
Was it the first one?
It did, yeah.
First, yeah.
So there's an inbuilt review, and that is, my understanding is it should be happening now.
Okay, so moving on then, 8.15, because we've already covered 8.14. At page 341 is a copy of the NI Chamber 3rd Quarter 2021 Economic Survey Summary, and that's for members to note. Then at page 359, correspondence from the National Children's Bureau providing a copy of its report on the impact of the pandemic for children and young people with disabilities, their families and the practitioners who work with them, including those aged 16 plus who attend further and higher education. That's for members to note, but if there are issues out of it that members want to raise, we can of course come back to it. Then 8.17 and 8.23 at pages 461 of your pack and page 16 of table papers are correspondence from an individual making a complaint about Ulster University. If members are agreed, we will respond to the individual to indicate that the committee is not in a position to intervene and that the individual should pursue the complaint through the appropriate processes within Ulster University and or with the Public Service Ombudsman. Okay, so moving on then to page 462, correspondence from Renewable NI regarding concerns around what it sees as the delayed introduction of the energy strategy. So members are content that we would forward that to the department, asking it to confirm the expected date of publication of the energy strategy.
Yep.
Page 464, there is correspondence from an individual regarding a lack of information, support and representation for mature students in higher education. So if members are content that we would forward that to the department and ask for a response to the issues that are being highlighted. And then page 465, there is a copy of the October monitoring statement from the Finance Minister. So that's for members to note. Page 12 of table papers, there is a copy of correspondence from the Chair of the EU Affairs Subcommittee on the Protocol to the BES Minister regarding draft regulations on general product safety, seeking clarification in relation to the practical impact for businesses and consumers in terms of regulatory divergence and the placing on the market in the north of British products, pending any equivalent changes to British rules. So that's for members to note, and we'll get the response. And similarly, at page 14 of table papers, there's a copy of correspondence from the Chair of the EU Affairs Subcommittee on the Protocol to the BES Minister regarding a regulation on cosmetic products, seeking clarification in relation to scientific assessments and in relation to the expected laying of a statutory instrument as close as possible to the date of the regulation coming into force here in the north. So again, it's for members to note. And so we are moving on to item number 9 then, which is any other business, and we've had none indicated. Okay. So item number 10 then is the date, time and place of the next meeting. And as Peter has indicated, we will have an extraordinary meeting on Monday the 8th at 10 a.m. in a room, in here, room 30, to complete the formal clause by clause consideration of the parental bereavement leave and pay bill and to agree the draft report. And then there will be an informal meeting tomorrow via Teams with the UUB Centre for Advanced and Sustainable Energy to coincide with COP26, which is taking place this week. And then obviously we have our meeting next Wednesday as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.